you know.
Hello and welcome. I'm Suma Katauka and you're watching the World Report on News 6 World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. After US envoy Steve Witkoff's meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin on the peace plan to end the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, US President has said that the talks were reasonably good while further emphasizing on his push for peace. Following the Moscow meeting on the Ukraine peace plan, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced plans for new talks between the Ukrainian delegation and Trump's team soon. Russian President Vladimir Putin is set to embark on his two-day visit to India starting today. The two leaders will attend an annual summit held by the both countries. French President Emmanuel Macron is in China for high-stakes talk with the Chinese president. While speaking on the meetings, Macron says the two countries must overcome their differences. Hamas has returned the body of another deceased hostage as part of the Gaza peace plan. Israel has confirmed the identity of the deceased as a Thai agricultural worker. With this, now the body of only one hostage remains with Hamas in Gaza. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has slammed Israel in his fresh comments on the Gaza war. He has said that there was something fundamentally wrong with how Israel conducted its military operation in the Gaza Strip. China has urged the US to stop official exchanges with Taiwan. China has firmly opposed to any form of official exchanges between the United States and Taiwan. They urged the US to stop official exchanges and refrain from sending any signals towards Taiwan's independence. Rwanda's foreign minister says a new accord with the US and DRC could help advance peace efforts, even as Rwandan-backed M23 rebels and the Congolese army accuse each other of breaching the ceasefire in eastern Congo. Now for this, we start with Russia and Ukraine. At least 6 people were injured in a Russian drone attack in the Odesa region, and both civilian and energy infrastructures facilities have been damaged. Ukraine's emergency services and firefighters battling flames and helping the wounded. Ukraine's energy company DTEK has said that one of its facilities was struck overnight, cutting power to more than 51,000 households. Crews are now working around the clock to restore electricity. Russia has continued to hold large areas in the south and east, but Ukraine still controls major ports. Now for this discussion, we welcome retired Major General Dr. Rajan Kochhar. He's a senior strategic and international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General and Doctor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now looking at this, how could continued strikes on these critical infrastructure from both sides, how do you think this is influencing the current international support and talks being held for the ceasefire?
Thank you, Osuma. Always a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you.
What is happening here is in Russia-Ukraine war, especially with the peace talks also going on simultaneously, a particular end state is actually emerging now, because Zelensky is also under a lot of pressure from within his own party to agree to the Trump peace deal. Steve Witkoff met Putin recently, and I believe the talks have gone off very well. So Russia has always embarked on a strategy to bring Ukraine down on its knees, and we are seeing this happening because the winters have now actually approached, and ground offensives are going to be limited. So most of the offensives are targeting the energy infrastructure. First, we saw the rail infrastructure being targeted. Almost, I believe, 23% of the rail infrastructure of Ukraine has been damaged in a tune of almost 10,000 kilometers. And also the logistics of the rail link from Poland, that was also recently targeted so that resupply of logistics does not happen from Europe side. So what we are seeing now in Odessa is a large scale attack on drones to target the energy infrastructure, because that will make life difficult for the people in Odessa, especially in the winter months. If you see the kind of temperatures in Ukraine or in Europe's or the Eastern Europe, we have seen running into a minus 15, 20 degrees temperature. People are actually living in those conditions. And centrally, on air heating mechanisms have to work. Generators also have to be employed. So when you target this power energy centers, you are actually hitting at the minds of the people, and the people are bound to raise pressure on Zelensky to come to the table as soon as possible. It's already happening. And the morale of the Russian army, if you look at the way the Russian army is fighting the battles, and especially Pokrovsk, that major logistic hub of the Ukrainians has actually fallen. And in western Donetsk also, Zaporozhye, Kharkiv, and all these areas are badly affected. So I think now Russia is trying to give a final push, because Russia you understands that more or less the ceasefire is going to happen, because that is the indications we are also getting from the Russian media as well as from the Western media who are covering these talks. So I think this is uh, a deliberate attempt or a deliberate strategy, I would say, on part of Russia to inflict maximum damage to ensure that Ukrainians are driven to a point where they have absolutely no option but to ask for peace.
Right. And Dr. Major General and Dr. Rajan Kochhar, now looking at how you've mentioned, the morale of both sides is being affected by these continuous attacks on these infrastructure. Given recent statements from European leaders affirming that Ukraine will not cede territory, do you see that realistically this peace talks that's gaining momentum, but the ceasefire, do you think it is feasible?
That's a very difficult question to answer, because
Yes.
nobody can predict the future here, because
Yes.
we have seen that the situation in such moments is always fragile, and any small incident can reopen the war. But under the present circumstances, I feel with the involvement of the United States, and to ensure that US plays a predominant role in the Ukrainian effort to fight the war. See, Ukraine cannot fight this war without the support of the United States, and
Yes.
European countries don't have the wherewithal to give it to Ukraine to fight this battle. So it is the center of gravity, I would actually use this word. The center of gravity is with the United States, because the United States was the one who instigated Ukraine to go into this war, and now United States is backfooting itself, from this war, distancing itself from this war. So, considering this peace plan has emerged from the United States, I think the stakes are very high for Trump to ensure that this peace plan will succeed. So, in my personal opinion, in my personal analysis, I am of this view that this ceasefire, once accepted, is going to last.
Right. Yes, of course, we can only speculate here, but thank you for sharing your analysis. And how should Kyiv now adjust its diplomatic and military strategy if US Russia talks begin to shape new proposals for this framework?
See, the first aspect of Kyiv is that I think they will have to go in for elections now. I think a time has been given in 6 months' time that Ukraine has to elect a new government and a new leader. And in all probability, Zelensky will not be there because Zelensky has been more or less an impediment as far as US is concerned as of now. Present thinking of the US that he has been an impediment, so now he needs to be sacrificed. So I think these elections are the first predominant aspect. A second aspect, if you look at the peace plan, is how US is going to monitor the reconstruction of Ukraine. The minerals are also involved. US companies also are looking at lucrative resources in Ukraine to exploit. Because I had actually mentioned earlier also in the program a couple of days back that this peace deal uh, smells of uh, a larger involvement of the United States in Ukraine now. And that is what is going to happen. And the political process may also be dictated to a large extent by the United States because they would like to have a pliable leader in Ukraine who will listen to what Trump has to say. So these are going to be very, very crucial times. And I'm certain that US will get more and more involved in Ukraine because after all, you just remember United States is $39 trillion in debt. Trump
Yes.
knows that the economy is not that strong of the United States as of now, and on the top of it, he is talking about H-1B visas and migrants stopping them into the United States. The United States was predominantly being run by the migrants only, and it's a
Yes.
fact.
Yes.
Technology sector, you see all the other sectors where the Indians are also working, they were contributing immensely to the GDP of the United States. But with all these policies coming into play, Trump has got limited options. His tariff weaponization is also not working on most of the countries. Canada is also not listening to the United States any longer. Mexico is also on a war path. So I think stakes will be very high for US in Ukraine, and the future political climate in Ukraine is likely to be dictated by the United States.
100%. With that, I would like to thank Dr. and Major General Rajan Kochhar for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now, moving on to our next news, putting a pause on plans to sanctions towards China's Ministry of State Security. The move follows reports of a major cyber spying campaign, but Washington is stepping back to avoid disrupting the trade truce reached earlier this year. U.S. officials say Chinese-linked hackers had targeted American and global telecom companies and even a U.S. Army National Guard network in a long-running operation known as Salt Typhoon. According to reports, the Trump administration also will not introduce new export controls against China. The White House has not commented, and the report has not been independently verified. Now we welcome Shruti Das Gupta. She's an international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Shruti, thank you for joining us again. Now, what's your analysis on this news that has just come in, but it's not independently verified?
Correct. It is not independently verified. The source is not named. It is only in one or two particular medias, and there's at best speculation as of now. But this speculation is grounded in the behavior of USA in the past few months against China. What we've noticed is that despite having a war on drugs, it is not sanctioning China, but going after the small fry and the ones that they can easily dominate to showcase a larger campaign in which to me looks like human rights violation. And they've not tackled on China, which does sell precursor chemicals. They've just got an agreement, verbal, from China in the G2 summit that Trump went to, that they will work at not providing those chemicals to people who would then later on make them into drugs and sell them in USA. So China has been handled with kid gloves, basically because they have a thunderous grab on the entire rare earth industry, and USA is very dependent on it. The chip industry, the smartphones industry, everything depends on rare earth and magnets, and that is where the technology is completely controlled by China. India has a small, very small sliver on it, and Indonesia, I believe, it has a small sliver on it. Nobody else comes close. And China is using that particular leverage to ensure that USA plays the court according to its rules. And that, therefore, despite having caught it in Operation Salt Typhoon and all the other things, they might choose to use it as a bargaining chip to have China probably release a few more technological secrets than actually taking on head on and giving sanctions. Because even in the case of Russian oil, China gets a free pass. Iranian oil, China gets a free pass. So from this, we know that, at least for me, sitting on my side of the world, it feels as if that USA, at least Trump, wants to maintain a status quo without actually declaring a war on China through any of their economic policies, as they have done with other nations. They would do it to Canada, they would do it to India, they would do it to African nations, Brazil, Mexico, but they would never touch China, because China has something they absolutely cannot function without, and they have no way of getting back control of it. They are, of course, trying to push Japan into the rare earth industry. The recent visit of Trump to Japan showed that he was willing to have that particular conversation and push policies to ensure that China is no longer in control of that particular market. But until such a situation actually becomes a reality, China would be handled with kid gloves by USA. And this particular report is probably based on this reality of US policies, and the speculation is therefore more or less justified.
Right, and thank you for laying it out all there. And Shruti, you know, like you mentioned, it does seem like when it comes to China, Trump seems to be walking on eggshells, which is not the case with any other country, including their best friends, long-term best friends like Canada, Mexico. So how might this decision, U.S. decision to delay sanctions on China's ministry, how do you think this will affect the balance between cybersecurity priorities of U.S. and maintaining the trade truce farther into future?
Well, they are definitely compromised. Let's look at the case of TikTok, for example. That is another case where they show they're not really actually worried about Chinese farming information. It is just now going via a US company, and which is why TikTok continues to be banned in India, despite USA now allowing it through technical terms. So what I do understand is they're not really about cybersecurity. Any of this investigation, any of the attacks is one. China is known to spy on a lot of people. Cyber attacks is a very common tactics that they employ. And USA knows it, they've caught it. It is just a bargaining chip for them. They are not looking at it in terms of cybersecurity. They're looking at it in terms of economic security as a bargaining chip to ensure that the trade relationships don't go into an imbalance, rather than have an all-out word of war or even a trade-off of policies. It is a very unilateral way of thinking that let's keep China on an even keel rather than disturb the dynamics that we have with them as of now.
And Shruti, lastly, you know, why do you think that Trump, when it comes to China, is kind of intimidated by this? You already mentioned the heavy dependence on a rare earth industry and not unipoly, but I forgot the word, but the China being the only source What else do you think contributes to U.S. or Trump administrations being like this towards China?
Well, this is because they let it grow in that particular direction. It was an earlier administrative fallout that they're dealing with during the Biden administration. They did not watch how China has simply taken over this entire market. But there, from me, I do see a little change happening, as in whatever is happening in the Myanmar side of the region, in Burma. That is something that I understand is a consequence of trying to get Chinese control out of the Indo-Chinese region. Where is this rare earth farming actually coming from? This is also the reason why China has put on the licensing, because it understands that now there are going to be an increase, now that the world has realized that China controls the market in such a huge way. There will be an attempt to steal the technology, steal the regions where it is excelling the most, the region which is controlling, in fact, the future of technology, because that is rare earth magnets and earth elements are exactly the absolute necessity for anything high tech. So when high tech is required, you look at USA for software, but the hardware needs what China is providing. So this is why the dependency is there, and they've woken up to it very late. In fact, the world has woken up to it very late, and now we're trying to fix a problem. And to put a genie back into the bottle is not a very simple process. You have to be very careful, and that is exactly reflected in how Trump is handling China.
Yes, I always love how you say it and your examples. Thank you very much, Shruti, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to our next discussion as well. Now, moving on, the focus to Honduras. Honduras's presidential race still remains on the knife's edge, as centrist candidate Salvador Nasrallah holds a razor-thin lead over conservative Trump-backed Nasri Asfura. With just over 80% of ballots counted, Nasrallah is at 40.23%, leading by fewer than 14,000 votes, while Asfura is at 39.69%, and Labour Party candidate Rixi Moncada trails in at a distant third. But the count has been plagued by repeated system outages. According to reports, officials are blaming the company running the tabulation platform, calling the latest unannounced maintenance stoppage as inexcusable. The Electoral Authority says that the presidency will be decided in a single round, with the top vote receiver winning the election outright, no matter how narrow the margin is. Now we welcome back Shruti Dasgupta. She's an international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Shruti, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, all of this raises many alarms. How might these repeated system outages, especially during this special vote counting, how do you think where do you think this is coming from, and how do you think this is going to be affecting public trust of Honduras people?
Well, the Honduras are pretty nonchalant about the stoppages. It is Trump who is jumping up and down, in my opinion, because it is a lower middle income economy. So they are pretty much aware of their technological setbacks. They are not as advanced. So if a system is going through correction, there is not much local furor about it. But the furor and the agony comes from USA, who feel that their particular chosen candidate is being sidelined by malpractices. Whereas the first halt in counting was done because there was a barely slim lead, and they realized that maybe the system is lagging, and so they manually counted all of it. Now, in manual counting, we all know there's a chance of manual error as well. But as the lead has grown after the second stoppages, also Trump's suspicion on that the Honduras people do not see eye to eye with him has led to the accusations of there being malpractices, or the election body over there is not completely as impartial as they should be. What we do know is that there is a very, very slim lead, as you've just said, a very few thousand votes. It can go either way. They will declare the results at the end of the month. But until then, every single time the system goes under menu checking, or it goes where the double checking happens, people get a chance to point fingers. What matters to me is beyond USA. If the UN body starts looking at it as a point of contention, then is when I will think that maybe the stoppages were more than just a technical glitch from the software side of the company that is providing these services, rather than it will point towards a malpractice rather than just a technical glitch. So right now, for me, Honduras is just watch and wait, because I don't see local furor or local agony over whatever the results or the glitches are being declared.
Right, and what is this motive of Trump's backing of this particular candidate, and what political implications could arise with this one-round victory in highly polarized race backed by US President Trump? Can US be seen as interrupting foreign domestic politics?
There's definitely interference in a foreign nation's elections when you declare a particular candidate as your favorite and you threaten to cut off aid. Although the aid is just about 1% of the GDP of Honduras, there are other levels and layers to how he can impact the entire conversation around the GDP of Honduras if he doesn't like the person in charge. What he has done is the person that Hernandez, that has been pardoned by him, was accused under Trump regime in 2024. But the investigation on Hernandez came from his brother's investigation in 2018. And then later, he was accused, Hernandez was accused, a former PM was accused in 2019. In both those years, Trump was in power. So him turning around and saying it's a political vendetta against Hernandez seems a little hollow when the investigations were primarily begun and conducted under his regime. Now, when Hernandez is pardoned, his second in command, or his candidate of choice, is Fura, who is Trump's favored nominee. From what I understand, Trump thinks, and which rightly so, UN reports designated so, that Honduras is a primary trafficking region for drugs that come into North America. The drugs that are coming in from Peru, Bolivia, and Colombia. Now, because of the drug trafficking corridor, they need to be able, you need a government that is going to work against it. Both Castro, who's the current PM, and his candidate Nasrallah, and Asfura, who's the current candidate that Trump favors, who is a former Hernandez party person. So what I understand is that both these people have their fingers in drug market. Hernandez's brother, as I said, was accused in 2018 by US forces. And, yes. And Castro's brother-in-law is accused of having ties to the drug network. So both these people are having their head and 10 fingers and toes into the drug trafficking system. So for what I understand, probably for
Yes.
the pardon from the 45-year sentence, Trump has probably gained Hernandez's network, and he plans to use Hernandez as a trump card, if I can say, to stop the flow of drugs. And that is why he needs his favored candidate in power, so that those policies can be executed. But this is in no way a favor to democracy.
Yes.
This is in no way a people's choice. This
Yes.
is influencing a particular election for your favored outcomes, and that is never fair.
Yes. Yes, it does not justify that. Thank you very much. With that, I would like to thank Shruti Dasgupta for joining us as always and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move the focus on to Hong Kong. Hong Kong's government is pressing ahead with Patriot's only legislative council election as the city mourns its deadliest fire in decades, which has killed at least 156 people. Officials say holding the vote as scheduled will help maintain stability and support post-disaster reconstruction, with Chief Executive John Lee insisting newly elected lawmakers can move quickly on recovery and legal reforms. But some residents say the timing is not right. Let's listen into what was shared.
Honestly, it's infuriating. I think it lacks respect, and there are so many things we want to say, but of course, I think this has been a very tough week for the entire Hong Kong population. Everyone is still mourning, and I really don't think everything else would be the first priority, except paying tributes and making sure all the victims and all the people being affected by the fires, it's been taken care of beforehand.
如期举行的话，我觉得它完全这是不现实的事情，因为大家现在像心情这么沉重，别说你选个什么选个这个领导出来啊，你就是选国家主席，现在都没心情啊。还有选这个肯定是要延后的事情嘛。然后我觉得出了这么多的事情，李家超他还能再坐这个位置吗？他只能下去的了。这么多人，他虽然说他没有直接责任，他有间接责任呐。
At Hong Kong Baptist University, a student democracy wall carrying a message urging the government to meet public demands so justice can be done was found barricaded on Wednesday. The covering comes as public calls for accountability over the fire continues to grow. Now we move on to US. Videos and photographs of Little St. James, the private island owned by the late financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, were released by the Democrats of the House Oversight Committee. However, last week, US President Donald Trump has signed a legislation ordering the Justice Department to release documents from its long-running investigation into the sex offender Jeffrey Epstein's files, eagerly sought by both his political opponents and members of his own base who have pressed for greater transparency in this case. The material could shed more light on the activities of Epstein, who socialized with Trump and other notable figures before his 2008 conviction on charges of soliciting a minor for prostitution. That's all we have time for. Keep watching News 6 World for more news updates from around the world.